Hello, fellow book readers. Today we are going to go over my top 10 science fiction books list. Do keep in mind this is coming from somebody who mainly reads fantasy. Like 95% of what I read is fantasy. So the amount of science fiction books I've read is not as much as people who really main science fiction as their primary genre. My view of science fiction is also skewed by my love of fantasy, so a lot of these books are going to be, I would say, odd choices that you won't find on most like hardcore science fiction readers lists. But what I hope you get out of this video is science fiction that a fantasy reader would recommend. Do keep in mind that there will be slight spoilers for every book I talk about in this video. And the only rule that I have is there won't be more than one book from a series in this list. Mainly because I want to give some love to different series, and not just all of it being one series. But with that being said, let's get started. And at number 10 is Dragon Quest by Anne McCaffrey. The Dragon Riders of Pern is classic science fiction, but really, it's classic fantasy too. Because, spoiler alert, the early books in Dragon Riders of Pern, they read very much like a classic fantasy book. So Dragon Quest is the second book in the Dragon Riders of Pern series, and I think it's a slight improvement on book one, Dragon Flight. Mainly because it's a little bit longer, but it's still paced really well, and there's just way more character work, way more world building, and the dragons play a larger, more significant role in this book. So my favorite part of reading Anne McCaffrey is the influence that she clearly had for modern fantasy. Before Anne McCaffrey, there were dragons in fantasy, but they were very different type of dragons. They were more like gods. Some of them can shapeshift into humans. They certainly weren't friends with humans most of the time. They were just very, very different. They were sort of deities. You can even look at Tolkien's dragons and see that with Smaug and some of the ones from the Silmarillion. But Anne McCaffrey changed the game. Anne McCaffrey dragons are very much a thing in very relevant fantasy today. You can look at A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin or Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, two major fantasy works that sell out in bookstores today. And they are very much inspired by Anne McCaffrey type dragons. Anne McCaffrey created these dragons that bond with humans and they can talk to humans, usually via telepathic powers, but that isn't always the case. And they grant their dragon riders magic. And who knows what fantasy would be like without Anne McCaffrey dragons. But besides for that, I think you have to look at A Song of Ice and Fire to truly understand how groundbreaking Anne McCaffrey was in fantasy. Because in Dragon Rise of Pern, there's a group called the Weir, who are these group of people who are guardians. And they protect civilization from this ancient apocalyptic level threat. And it's been hundreds or thousands of years since this threat has been seen, and the population has kind of forgotten about this threat, and the Weir is sort of disrespected in civilization. Like, nobody respects the Weir anymore. But this threat has returned. And what does that remind me of? The Night's Watch from A Game of Thrones, where they're just this ancient guardians of people, but nobody in civilization believes anything they say anymore. They're certainly not respected. Nobody sends them warriors anymore. And yeah, their main purpose was once to protect against this apocalyptic level threat of the Others, who are more commonly known as the White Walkers in the television show. But in the book, that word isn't really used very often. They're generally just called the Others. So yeah, it's pretty clear to me that, among other things, George R.R. Martin got a lot of his inspiration from the Dragon Riders of Pern. And I love that. That's why I love reading these stories. But Dragon Quest itself is just a great story. And I recommend anybody to get past the first book, Dragonflight, to read the second book, Dragon Quest, because Dragon Quest is just so good. And yeah, I understand that my first book in my top 10 list is a book that really reads more like a fantasy. It has inspired more fantasy than science fiction, but it's definitely classic science fiction at the same time, because the main enemy that they're fighting is this star, and they're talking about all these planets that they can go to. It's classic science fiction, but it's also fantasy at the same time. Okay, and at number 9 is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This book was written in the late 1800s, and it still holds up today. It is very hard for prose from this time period to translate to easy modern day reading, but this is a novella that can be read by anybody and they will instantly pick it up, instantly understand everything that's happening. It's not confusing at all. It's a very, very easy read. That's part of the reason I love it. The other reason I love it is because of the twist at the end. This book is about the twist, and the twist of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is, I think, arguably the most famous twist ever to be written in literature. And it's done really, really well. It's not just well known because, there's been movies about it. No, it's actually written extremely well. But do keep in mind, the story really is the twist. Don't expect there to be this like huge climax after the twist. No, the climax is the twist, and it's okay to know it going in. It doesn't ruin it at all. Seeing all the foreshadowing and the build to it is really fascinating, and it's a work of art, really. But yeah, this book doesn't actually follow Dr. Jekyll. It follows one of Dr. Jekyll's friends who is sort of like investigating Dr. Jekyll and wondering what's going on with him. And it's science fiction because Dr. Jekyll achieves his transformation into Mr. Hyde via potions and chemistry and all that. And it's sort of like Frankenstein, where it's like a warning about science and how it could go wrong. I really enjoy it. It's both a gothic horror and a science fiction novel, and I think it plays off both of those really well while being a quick and easy read. Okay, and at number 8 is The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu. I know you might be thinking that it's cheating to have a short story collection on this list, but I assure you it is not, because it is my list and there are no rules. The title story in this is a fantasy, it's a magical realism fantasy, but you get that story out of here, and the most of the rest of this collection is just science fiction, like straight science fiction. Some of it hard science fiction, some of it more like cyberpunk light science fiction, but all of it is good. Ken Liu is a master short story writer. His prose is a work of art, and he thematically writes these really powerful pieces. My favorite science fiction short story in this collection is The Regular, which is sort of this cyberpunk crime noir type story where this cyborg human is investigating this serial killer who is killing escorts and stealing the camera implants in their eyes to try to bribe the government. It has some really tense moments, some really great action, some really great character work, and it's a longer short story, but it's not overly long. It still tells the story in like novelette form. It's well worth the read. But don't you worry, there's a bunch of other good ones in here, including two that warn about AI, which I think is pretty relevant today. The first being Simulacrum, which is sort of this story about a father who is using these holograms to imitate his family and imitate like lovers that he can have an affair with. It's really strange, really messed up, but a really powerful story. And the second one is The Perfect Match, which tells the story about this program called Tilly that every human on the planet uses to guide them in life. It tells them what to do, what to eat, where to work, who to be friends with. And it's supposed to be this perfect life, but is it really? If AI is controlling you, do you really have freedom then? That's really the question the story asks, and I think it's done extremely well. And then we got probably the most powerful piece in the entire book, which is The Man Who Ended Human History, a documentary which tells the story of a person who created a time machine to take people back to this World War II era period where they get to see the atrocities that this Japanese war unit committed during the war. And that creates all sorts of problems in the present day when it's reported back to the governments and there's sort of cover ups going on and things of that nature. It's a really powerful piece, and I definitely recommend reading it. There's just so many different types of science fiction stories in here, and they all work. And that's only 4 of them. There's like 7 or 8 others that are just really strong. Okay, number 7 for me is the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover. I recommend picking up the Dark Lord Rising omnibus, which contains 2 other novels. The first novel directly leads up to Revenge of the Sith, so it ends right where Revenge of the Sith begins. And then the last novel in the trilogy is about the rise of Darth Vader. But I'm here today specifically to talk about Revenge of the Sith, which lands at number 7. I'm a big Star Wars fan. My favorite Star Wars movie is A New Hope, the original Star Wars film. I think it's objectively the best one. I know a lot of people consider Empire to be the best one, and I love Empire, but I think the middle of Empire is not as strong as the middle of the original Star Wars film. But I also love the prequels. Now, the first two prequels, admittedly, are not super strong movies, but I think the third one is a very strong movie with just a couple flaws in it. And the novel erases those flaws because the main problem with Revenge of the Sith is that Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen just have zero chemistry. It's both the dialogue and the script they're given, and just like their on-screen partnership. Like they don't bounce off each other well. But obviously, in the book, that's changed because they're not that actor and that actress, and I think their chemistry is just a lot better in the book. The romance is a lot better, and it adds a lot to the plot. Now, the second problem with the movie is the ridiculous Emperor Palpatine versus Mace Windu fight, where Ian McDiarmid is moving like 1 mile per hour, and he's taking out these 3 Master Jedi's in like 2 seconds before he fights Mace Windu. And that fight is even like really slow, which is weird because they're like supposed to be two of the best fighters in the universe. Uh, but that's what happens when you have a 90-year-old Ian McDiarmid fighting. Like it was just never going to work, and they couldn't use a stunt double for a lot of the fight because there's like close-up shots of his face. But in the book, that fight's awesome because you realize Palpatine's going like 2 million miles per hour, and you get the lead up to that fight with Anakin and Mace Windu talking. And that scene's in the movie, but it's better in the book because you get to see Anakin's inner thoughts and how he's struggling to stay in the temple like Mace Windu ordered, and you get to see what he's thinking as he goes over to the fight. It's all done really well, and I think it elevates the book in a way that the movie wasn't able to do. But all the other stuff in the movie that's great is still in this book. The Anakin Obi-Wan stuff is awesome. The Palpatine Anakin stuff really works. The fall of Anakin is still expertly done. I love this book, and I can't wait to read more Star Wars books in the future. But the Revenge of the Sith novelization is great. I remember reading this like way back in I think like 2010 or something like that. It still holds up today. Okay, and number 6 is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I think this book is great. It is one of the young adult series that I would recommend anybody to read, both because I think it's just like a really good dystopian novel, maybe even my favorite dystopian novel, and because it's like a great action flick book. Like it's just a popcorn flick book. It's very, very tense, and but yet the emotion and character work is still there. Like I think Peeta and Katniss's connection in that book is really strong and really believable and really works. And the book doesn't shy away from the darkness of it all. Rue's death scene is tragic, and it speaks to you on the page how devastating it is. I don't think that Suzanne Collins gets enough credit for how well she writes like sad scenes because that scene is super sad, but it's written extremely well. And the politics of it all that is going on behind the scenes is done really well. It's not really on the page in this book, but you can feel it through all the actions going on in the Capitol right before the games begin. I wish the districts were explored a little bit more in this book, but it's the first book, and you like know it's going to be explored in the other book, so it's not a negative at all. And some of the other characters we meet, like Haymitch, perfect. And you meet President Snow at the end, and I think he really sets him up as like a very big antagonist. His presence is felt just in that one chapter alone. Uh, I really enjoyed this book. Okay, number 5 is a book I actually read this month. It's brand new. It's The Last Contract of a Psycho by Fonda Lee. Fonda Lee is just one of my favorite authors. There was almost no chance I wasn't going to like this. This is getting some mixed reviews online, and I'm actually a little surprised by that because I think people were expecting the Greenbone Saga, and that's not what this book is. I also don't think people understand that this book is really more about politics than it is about like cyberpunk samurais. Like that's not what this book is either. So if you're expecting those two things, I can see why you would be disappointed, but like you shouldn't be based on like the first couple chapters because that's not what this book is clearly from the opening. And what I love about this book is the character work. Fondly is one of the best character writers I've ever read, and her characters in this book are great. Now, there's not as many characters in this as there is in the Greenbone Saga, but it's a standalone, and there shouldn't be as many because of that reason. But I think like Asiko herself is a very interesting character. I think Rain Cobb is another interesting character. I think Martim surprised me. I did not expect him to be as easy a character to root for as he became. And then the directors are done really well too because they're kind of evil, but you see it. And the politics between the terraforming and the communications group, I think, is done extremely well. And I think the world building in this is also really good. Now, it's not a planet I would ever want to live on because it's basically a desolate wasteland where it's uninhabitable unless you're inside these air bubbles. But I think the brutality of it all is perfect for this book. And yeah, is the end not really bittersweet? Is it more tragic? Yes, but that's not a problem for me because that's the story this book was telling the entire time. I didn't expect this to be Jade Legacy style ending. And Jade Legacy is one of my favorite concluding books I've ever read. But that's not what I was expecting when I was reading this entire book. When I got to the end, I was expecting an end like we got. And I'm happy we got it, even though it made me sad because that's what this book called for. So yeah, I love this book. Is it perfect? No, but it's damn great, and it lands number 5 for me. Okay, number 4 for me is Dream Songs Volume 1. Yes, I know it's another short story collection. Again, no rules. I don't care. This is by George R. R. Martin, by the way. He's an expert short story writer. Some people don't know that. Before he wrote A Game of Thrones in 1996, he was primarily a short story writer. He did write a few novels before then, but most of his work was short stories or novelettes or novellas. And they're all pretty darn good, and they were mostly science fiction. He was mostly a science fiction writer because that's where the money was back in the 70s and 80s. It wasn't really in fantasy. And if I was just rating Sand Kings alone, this would probably be in my top 10. But this book has so much more to offer you than just Sand Kings. It has Sand Kings, which is, this horror sci-fi type combination, which is perfect. It's got Night Flyers, which is about this ghost ship, supposedly, but it's also not really about that. It's got A Song for Laya, which is more about depression, but it's probably my favorite story in this book. Song for Laya is awesome. It's got When the Mistfall Comes, I think, or is it When the Mistfall Falls? I don't remember the name of the story, but I love that story. It's basically space Loch Ness monster story, and it's about the power of belief. And should we be discouraging belief? And obviously, the answer should be no to that. And I think that story speaks really well on it. It's got Bitter Blooms. Bitter Blooms nobody ever talks about, but it's awesome. It's this like sort of spaceship story, and it's about this snowy planet. It's really, really, really good. It's got The Hero, which is sort of Twilight Zone esque. It's perfect, along with so many others. There's 22 short stories in there, and about like 15 of them are science fiction ones, and I think 13 of those 15 were at least great for me. Like, I love this collection of short stories. It is my favorite short story collection I've ever read. And like I said, it's mostly science fiction. It has most of George R. R. Martin's greatest hits in it, and it's so good. If you love A Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, you should read this, and I promise you, you'll probably enjoy a lot of what's in this book. Okay, at number 3 is Dune by Frank Herbert. I love this book. It does read more like a fantasy, in my opinion. I know that's blasphemy because Dune is like foundational science fiction, and I do think the rest of the series reads very science fiction like, which is why I don't really enjoy the rest of the series. I actually stopped reading after Children of Dune. Haven't gotten past that. But the first Dune book reads like this great combination of science fiction and fantasy, and I love it. It's a near perfect book for me. The desert planet is Star Wars vibes. Obviously, it clearly inspired Star Wars. The Bene Gesserit, they're like basically just wizards, but they're not because they use science. But let's be honest, it's basically magic. They're basically wizards. It's awesome. They're great. They're perfect. And they're a lot like the Aes Sedai and Wheel of Time, even though that's not where Robert Jordan got the influence, according to Robert Jordan. It's got prophecy elements with like a chosen one character. I think Paul Atreides is arguably the best chosen one character in literature. I would not argue that. He's awesome, a great main character. It's got, instead of dragons, it's got giant worms. It's got those, its own sort of fantasy beasts. It's got great gladiator duels. It's got sword fighting. It's got it all. It's got like apocalyptic level threats going on. It's got rebellions and resistances and evil kings. Yeah, it's perfect book, and the climax is great. It tells the story of like a hero, but also like what does that cost you in the end? It's it's such a good novel, and I don't even know why I have to hype it up because everybody's heard of Dune. If you're interested in science fiction, it should be one of the first science fiction books you read because it still reads really easy. It reads like modern literature, but it's foundational at the same time. Okay, number two for me is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, the first novel in the Skyward series. This is his young adult science fiction series. But I actually think it's quite a bit darker than what he normally writes, at least the first book. And to me, that was intriguing because this book was almost very dark at points, and he doesn't shy away from making like tough decisions in this book, which I really liked. Which sometimes Sanderson doesn't make tough decisions, but he did in this book, and I really loved it. It also has a school element to it. It felt like, what if Luke Skywalker went to the rebel pilot camp in A New Hope instead of running off with Obi-Wan Kenobi? That's what it felt like to me. That's what this beginning of this felt like to me, and it was really, really fun read. It has sort of a Dolores Umbridge style antagonist, but it also has mysteries of why are these people trapped on this planet? Why do these people called the Krell keep attacking them? It has a magic around the entire book that they're trying to figure out what it is. It has a great elite cast of side characters. Our main character, Spencer, it's a single point of view story, is just really easy to root for. The opening chapter is one of the better opening chapters I've ever read. It has a really great Brandon Sanderson-esque climax, which you expect from him because that's what he's known for, is writing these really good climaxes. This is no different. This was an easy 5-star read for me this year. I loved it. And I think it appeals to everybody, not just young adult fantasy readers. Now, the rest of the series does get very young adult, but the first book I think is less young adult than most young adult books. Other than it being sort of a coming of age story, it doesn't really fit in the young adult section, in my opinion. And then my number one science fiction book that I've ever read, in my opinion, is Morningstar by Pierce Brown. This is the third book in the Red Rising series and the final book in the original Red Rising trilogy. I just think it's a masterpiece of a book. Every point of view character hits. The twists and turns in this left me in shock. The climax, delicious. And it has way more closure than you would think it would have because it really is the end of what Pierce Brown originally intended to write in the trilogy. So it's a very satisfying conclusion, and you could like just stop here, and I think you would be okay. I haven't read the other three books yet, but I'm going to, and I actually can't wait to do that. But I loved the end of Morningstar. It was pretty perfect. And I love how much slower this book is than Golden Sun. Now, that doesn't mean it's like badly slow or badly paced. It's still paced really good, but the plot is given a little bit more room to breathe. And Golden Sun would make my top 10. It would probably be number 3 or number 2 for me if I could have more than one book from a series in my list. But I'm constrained by my own rules, so Morningstar is the only one making it. I love Golden Sun, but Morningstar is perfect. It just has so much character growth in it, and I love the journey that all of the characters went through. Like each and every one of them. Severa, Mustang, obviously Darrow, even Cassius. And I think the antagonists are on point here. Jackal is so easy to hate. Octavia gets a little bit more layers to her. We lose Augustus early, but it still works really well. And this book has one of my favorite sub arcs of the entire original 3 books in the Sephi Norse plotline. I love Norse mythology, and the Norse mythology in this was so good. It was so funny, but also perfect. That whole storyline where they go to the north and then they go to fake Asgard and they see the Golds dressed up as Loki and Thor and Odin. I thought that was so good. It just worked for me. And I kind of just want Pierce Brown to write a Norse mythology fantasy now because I loved that plotline. And Ragnar's death, that hit me really hard. And that wasn't the only one. Like all the scenes that Pierce Brown was trying to make impact with worked for me. Like I thought they all hit and they all were emotionally devastating. And yeah, I just can't talk this book up enough. It's perfection. And that is my top 10 science fiction book list. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, what your top 10 is. Let me know what science fiction book I should read next. I'm not a huge science fiction book reader, so hopefully this gives you some insight onto the type of science fiction that I actually enjoy. And as always, thanks for watching.